We have a special guest with us on Life, Death, and Beyond, Nicole Kerr. Nicole Kerr is a holistic wellness and NET practitioner, dietitian, author, speaker, and disabled veteran. Nicole endured an out-of-body, spiritually transformative experience in a near-fatal car accident during her time in the Air Force, where she was out of the body and felt the pure love of the divine and met an angel. Upon her return, Nicole's recovery has led her to inspire others to reach the overlooked domains of emotional, energetic, and spiritual well-being. Nicole's book, You Are Deathless, can be found on Amazon.com. Hi, welcome, Nicole. So glad you could join us today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I feel like we have so much to cover. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Laura, and I want to thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I've just been really looking forward to this and hope our discussion can really benefit those who hear it.
Perfect. Me too. Yeah, definitely. I feel it's like very important information to be getting out there at this time. There's so much going on, and kind of helping to bring all that out into, everybody's hands, so they can, whether it resonates with them or not, it's always good to take a look at it, and let them decide for themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. So let's start with the pre-near-death experience. How was life like before the near-death experience and actually being in the Air Force Academy?
Okay, so I grew up in the South. I mean, the deep South, okay, Jackson, Mississippi. So grew up in a really conservative household, very, very religious. My mother was Lutheran, my father was Southern Baptist. So growing up, we had to go to the Baptist church in the evening, the Lutheran church in the morning, the Baptist church on Wednesdays, revivals. I mean, we got a heavy dose of religion and theology growing up, and it was fear-based. Everything was about, following rules, God's rules, Ten Commandments, the church rules, because every denomination seems to have their own rules. So very rule based. And then my father was former military. He had gone to the Air Force Academy and cross commissioned into the Marine Corps and was an officer in the Marines and flew in the helicopters in the Bay of Pigs. So he was very controlling and very orderly. And our house was very uh, dad was God, basically. You did everything he said. He knew what was best for you. There was no individuation as kids. There's four of us in our family, children wise. And he knew what was best for us. Every decision, where you're going to go to college, dating. I never dated when I grew up because nothing good comes from dating. We didn't, one of his 10 commandments, I put it in my book, is you couldn't sleep over at other kids' houses, okay? Because you would come home the next morning and you would have been awake and you're not productive. Okay. So he wouldn't allow us to spend the night. It's things like that. No alcohol allowed in the house because his dad was an alcoholic. So, it very rigid, very much in a bubble. I did attend parochial schools and then went into the public school system, which was heavily integrated in Mississippi at that time. I was in a junior high school that was 99 African American. So that was a real different experience for me. And so I did things like ballet. I was a teen model. I wasn't very, I wasn't an athlete. So going into the military wasn't something that I had prepared for. Okay. It wasn't something that I thought, oh, I want to, fly planes or I want to go do the space program. It was only to please my father. So I, the second child, am a massive people pleaser. Actually, I'm a recovering people pleaser. Let me add that, okay? It's an identity that a lot of us take on, especially women in the South. That you want to please people. You don't want to get into conflict with anybody. You want everybody to like you, and that especially comes from that need of needing your parents to approve of you and to love you and to accept you. So you're always striving for their acceptance and their love and their standards to meet or exceed their standards, which are very, very high in my family. So um So yeah, I did well. I did a, we were always doing something. I mean, ballet was my life for a while. I really thought I was going to be a ballerina. And then I got to be 5'11". And when I got on point, I was taller than any of the guys. So they're like, no, no more ballet for you, you know? So I actually, my father said they started admitting women into the service academies. And I think you should apply and go, Nicole. It's going to make you a great woman that few could rival. And you're going to get opportunities that you would not get in a regular university college setting. So I applied and to my shock got accepted. Okay. I'll never forget when my representative called and the principal called me out of my classroom and he called and said, congratulations, Nicole, you're going to be in the 86th class at the United States Air Force Academy. And I was like, oh my God, now I got to go, because in my family, when you commit to something, you got to do it. Failure is not an option, especially if you chose to do it. Okay. The shame of that, the humiliation, the feeling of less than, not good enough. I couldn't stomach that, So that was a lot of when I got up there and realized during boot camp that this was not my path, that this isn't what my soul wanted to do. um, I couldn't quit. I just could not quit because I didn't want to deal with all of that shame and feeling like a loser. I'll just be honest, to feel like a loser because I couldn't hack it. Um, that's such a horrible feeling. It really is to feel that way, like you failed and you couldn't do it, and people think less of you, and that somehow it would mar me for the rest of my life. That people will remember, oh, Nicole, quit the academy or failed out of the academy or whatever it was. So fear ran my nervous system my entire life. Fear of God from the church and their doctrines, fear of my father, then go to the military and it's fear again. So grew up with that emotion unconsciously running my system. And so it's always anxiety producing to have a lot of fear. So it was my second year at the academy. Now, I still didn't want to be there, but somehow I kept making it through. I got through it. Um, and we were at a squadron event at the beginning of the year, and I was getting a ride back from that. It was mandatory. And I'd gotten a ride with a senior, and we were the last to leave this event, and he wanted to stop at a bar and have a couple of drinks before we had to get back to the academy. And I, for once in my life, thought I'm going to break some rules because my dad's rules were no smoking, no drinking, and no dating cadets. Now, here I am at a place where there's 4,000 guys and 300 women. And he's like, no dating cadets. Okay. I'm like, everything you go to college to do, he's telling me don't do, right? So I'm thinking, I'm going to break a rule here. I'm going to actually have a beer, and a cigarette. And so, whoa, at 19 years old. So we do get back in the car. And the last thing I remember is the bartender asking the driver, he's like, are you okay to drive? And he's like, yeah, yeah, I'm fine. So next thing I know is I wake up in the ICU at a local community hospital and I'm like, oh my God, where am I? And this is what happened in the meantime. And I don't know if you guys
Wow.
can see that, but that is actually a 1965 Corvette convertible. And it that's the passenger side you're looking at. And you can see it was completely crushed. And I was actually
Oh my God.
pronounced dead at the scene. And the only thing that I could remember from this were the white lights that I encountered when my body flew from this vehicle. And I will kind of describe it to you as rays of brilliant white light kind of flooded me from all sides. It's like streams of light cocoon me, like wrapping every part of my being in it like a chrysalis of soothing waves. That's kind of how I describe it. So that to me, I now realize is the love of God. And instead of pain, of impact, which you would think you would feel, I felt rocked and held. There was absolutely no pain associated with this crash. And I want your viewers to know that if you know someone that has had a traumatic accident and you think they suffered a lot of pain before they died, I can pretty much tell you 99.9% of the time they did not, because what
Mm,
happens is your soul leaves your body prior to your physical body hitting the ground and actually, breaking the bones and coming apart or whatever happens,
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's exactly what happened to me. And I only know that, Laura, because my memory of the crash came back 19 years later.
Oh,
That white
yeah.
light was the only thing I remember. And I'm sure a lot of your audience knows that that white light, um, Raymond Moody, who coined the phrase near death experience, he talks about that being the most common experience that near death experiencers have. That shared experience is some form of white, kind of clear. It doesn't, it's an indescribable brilliance. It doesn't blind you, uh, but it's just doesn't hurt your eyes, but it's just unbelievable. It's hard to describe it. It really is hard to describe, but you could feel it. And it just felt like I was an astronaut in outer space.
Mm,
So I had to ask my surgeon years later because I said, I just remember this white light. And I said, was it the operating room lights? Did I somehow become conscious and see them and just remember them? Or was it something else? She goes, oh gosh, Nicole, no, you were totally out for 12 hours, unconscious. She said, no, whatever you experienced was something uh, extraordinary. It was some intervention at a divine level that I've never seen, she said, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, and I
so
think
that
that's
was,
important. Yeah, because
yeah,
like the distinction between the white light of a light shining in your eyes hurts your eyes, and then the light from the other side doesn't. Because I had that in my own experience going into the light from the void, and it didn't hurt. It didn't, I wasn't like, because I didn't even have a
yeah,
body at that point. But
right.
also, like, just to kind of go back before we get too far ahead, um, like with the whole being out of the body, like you said, you didn't have any feelings of pain in a traumatic experience like that. My guides have also told me that you're out of the body whenever something tragic happens. And
Yeah,
when you come back in is when you remember and you start feeling it again. So
yeah.
that's a great indicator where you were saying you didn't feel anything but
Mm-mm.
being wrapped in love, right?
Absolutely. And to this day, I still don't feel that pain. The only pain I remember was waking up in the ICU and and thank God I didn't have a mirror to see myself because was I had fractured so many. I was a mess. I mean, coming from being pronounced dead to 4 months in the hospital and a long recovery period, it was, I had massive injuries. So it took a long time physically to heal and even longer mentally and spiritually. So yeah, it's been quite the journey of self transformation. And I call it going from a near death experience to a spiritually transformative experience. And it takes a long time. I don't think that a lot of people can integrate what happened to them overnight. Very few of us can, because it is so big and so life transforming that you have to be able to like reconceptualize your whole life. Belief systems that you thought you believed in are upended, and you experience something that, oh, I didn't learn that in church. In fact, I learned the opposite. So, what does that mean now? I have to reconceptualize who God is. God is not this. Person with a white hair and how it's described in a lot of paintings from the 1700s of God on the Sistine Chapel or whatever. That's not God is not a person. And there's no judgment on the other side. I think that was one of the biggest reliefs when my memory came back, was to remember I'm not being judged, because that was such a big part of growing up, is you had to do good works. You had to be a good person and do good things and follow the rules in order to get into heaven. And if not, you were going to hell, and scared the wee wee out of us as little kids. And
Mm-hmm.
that imprint stays with you, that fear that you got to do, check all these boxes in order to get to heaven. And that's nothing at all. That's not the truth. It's fear that was created by these different religions to keep people under control and to keep them in fear so that they wouldn't actually um, live large and be in love and light and love, because that's the opposite of fear, you know? So it was very transforming on so many levels. And it's taken me 42 years, and it's still an ongoing process to pull back these belief systems and these layers. And bits and pieces of the NDE still come to me, now. And it's just an amazing journey. And I really believe each of us, Laura, that have an NDE, we're an old soul, that we can really absorb a lot of pain and suffering, because we know we have to come back and tell people what we experienced. And it is our responsibility to do that, to awaken people out of this old, um, almost like a prison belief system that really keeps you in fear. And fear is what I was told on the other side is your message, Nicole. Tell people not to fear death, because so many people fear dying, and either the process of it or the actual event. They don't know what's going to happen to them. And I have been on this quest now since my memories come back, to really, my mission is, it's a huge mission, which you're on as well, is how to tell people, not to fear death. And you really have to go back and look at these root issues of your belief in God, your family belief systems, generational belief systems, and clear all of this and really do a deep dive into your own soul and do the work to
Mm,
transform into the being that you were created to be, not who someone else told you to be.
right. Yeah. And it's unfortunately that we get that ingrainment when we're younger and we don't really know any better to look
Yep,
up to who's telling it to us because we don't know any better.
that's
But
exactly
we're kind
right.
of at their mercy, or we're at
That's
their
true.
mercy, right?
That's true.
So, but yeah, and unpacking that, like there's a lot to go into on those topics too as well. So with the whole it took you said 19 years for the memory to come back, and then did you do any like healing or looking at anything in the meantime, or did after the 19 years your memory came back that you started doing like the healing work? Because it was my near death experience, and then it was about from there, like after 2 weeks, like immediately, like somebody taught me how to meditate, somebody taught me how to do yoga, and I was just 10 years, I was on a whole path of self-healing and transformation and spiritual transformational experiences. And then now spirit's like, time to talk about it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I
how
think,
was it for you, like your timeline?
yeah, I think, for the first, those 19 years, one of the hardest things for me to have dealt with was the emotional and mental aspect of a trauma that I went through with this NDE, the whole accident and just the trauma of going to the other side and coming back. And I don't think people really understand that that is traumatic and you have to process that. But my parents are deeply religious, and the doctor had told mother when I got discharged that Nicole needs psychiatric and psychological help. And my mother looked at this doctor and said, Jesus is our psychologist, and Nicole's going to be just fine. Okay, so I have to tell everybody I love Jesus. Okay, I believe in Jesus as a way shower. But my belief now, the way I was raised, is you have to go through Jesus to get to God. Okay, God is within us. But Jesus never came down and sat on the sofa and said, Nicole, let's process this. So, as a result of not getting mental health help with this trauma, I developed, back in the 80s, in 1983, it was compulsive overeating, so an eating disorder. And they really didn't know a whole lot about binge eating disorder back then, which is what it's now called. So, I started, that's how my body adapted, was to to binge eat. And then I felt so bad about myself and hated myself. And I will tell you, it took me 20 years to move through that. It's when the memory came back that I was able to let go of the eating disorder. So I couldn't do it before then. I tried, I went into nutrition, I became a dietitian. I thought if I knew it, I could heal myself. I attracted other people. I just went into eating disorders as a field of study. I really couldn't understand why I couldn't just quit doing this behavior. And it was so shame based as well. And I know that people that experience whatever range of disordered eating, there's so much shame with that. And I get that. I have been there, done that, and it is horrible. And then you beat yourself up, you judge yourself, and it's just this vicious cycle. And I had to come to terms to understand that that was my body's survival during all that time. That's the only way it could survive dealing with the trauma that I was going through. So I started out in a 12-step program, Overeaters Anonymous. That's kind of how my spiritual journey first started when they say the first step, is turn yourself over to a higher power. That's the first time I'd heard something other than God as a name for um, the divine or whatever you want to call source. And so that's kind of where it started. And my parents thought I was in a cult. Okay, they thought 12-step programs were a cult. So it already started a clash there by me trying to get help. They really were the minds of it's willpower. You just eat one piece of pizza. You don't eat the whole pizza, And I'm just like, no, it's not. It's not willpower. But they couldn't understand that because they don't understand mental illness that way. And so I had to start on a path of discovery, and I got into therapy. I started doing things like that. But I also went to every single church denomination. I mean, I was at the Mormon church, I was at Buddhist, I was at the Jewish, I went to everything looking for that light, that feeling, that connection, and could not find it at any church that I went to. So I just gave up on church. I was like, this is not, I'm not feeling it. It's not coming back. I don't believe what they're telling me. And so I started getting into body therapy, sonomic healing. And a lot of I wrote a book called You Are Deathless. And the book is really my journey of healing and what I've gone through to get where I am today. And it has involved looking at almost every type of healing possible. I have experienced it, including shamanic. And that was a huge turning point for me to have a shamanic journey with a healer in Hawaii, and that really helped me bring back those parts of my soul that fragmented at the time of the crash, to bring those back and to become whole again. So I really decided that I'm going to expand into all realms of wellness. I'm not just going to focus on the physical with nutrition. And so all those years I worked at the Centers for Disease Control, trying to help people with chronic diseases, preventative medicine and lifestyle medicine. I was very depressed. I was very lonely. I never had a sustainable relationship with a guy because until the memory came back, I didn't realize that I was scared of men's anger, that if I didn't please the guy and they got angry at me, my brain thought that they could kill me, because that's exactly what I remembered with the crash. Is the guy made a sexual pass at me and I said no, and he got angry and he turned the wheel of the Corvette, and he was
Mm.
speeding and it fishtailed, hit a huge boulder. This is in Colorado, flipped the car over. We were both ejected. I was in a ditch and he had some minor injuries, but he was well over the alcohol limit. He was drunk and later prosecuted by the state of Colorado. But unfortunately, his dad was a four-star general and he was allowed to graduate. So I then
Mm.
got a real sense of justice, or the justice isn't fair, that there's rank had its privileges, and saw that whole piece of life play out. It was really upsetting to me how people can get away with stuff, So just a lot on that level. And when I had the crash, when the memory came back, I want to tell people, because this is really cool, because you're saying, your soul comes back in and then you remember. So you've heard of that expression, your eye is the window to your soul?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So when the paramedics, the first responders got there, it was about 10 to 13 minutes after the crash. Some bystanders heard the crash, called 911, came over to check me and the driver, couldn't get any vitals on me, put a blanket on me. And when the first responders got there, said, well, this lady's dead, but you can go work on the other guy. And one of the first responders, who I consider one of my angels, and I definitely know they're angels in the world, they come in many forms. Um, he took the blanket off of me, former Navy SEAL, and he went to work on me, and he couldn't get any vitals. He couldn't get anything on me. Just, I was out. And the last thing he did was called a sternal knuckle press, which in healthcare is designed to elicit pain in the body. And the only sign of life he got out of me, Laura, was my right pupil dilated. That was it.
Oh.
So he knew I was alive. And at that moment, my soul, which had gone to the other side, flew back into my eye, and he was able to get a blood pressure on me of 60 over zero. Now that's still in and out of death. They got me
Mm-hmm.
into the bus. They started CPR, and got me to the nearest community hospital. And basically just were trying to keep me alive at that point. Then it was a long journey of 4 months in the hospital, 6 months, six major operations, in and out of death again during one of those operations. I coded and left again. So I kept trying to go back to the light two more times during that 4 months because I was in such pain and suffering. And I also knew that I had disappointed my father because he judged me that I got in the car with somebody who was drunk, and I deserved what I got. I disappointed God and I disappointed him. So that's still his belief system 42 years later, that basically if you set yourself up for something and something bad happens, you deserved it. And that to me was the hardest part of my mental health healing because I could not get his forgiveness. And I don't know, it's just been so painful to be rejected based on a decision I made. And turns out years later, I contact my roommate who left the academy that fall. She tells me, Nicole, this is what really happened. You and I were supposed to ride back together, but I wanted to ride with another guy that I liked, and I didn't want you along. So there's only one other guy to ride back with. And you told me, well, he's been drinking, so I don't feel comfortable doing that. And she said, oh, for once in your life, go have fun. I'll see you back at the academy. You'll be fine. And I wasn't. So I didn't ever remember that. And she said, I felt so guilty that I quit the academy. And I didn't know that for 38 years that that's what happened. I had no other way to get back. I mean, this is before cell phones. This is out at a park. So I didn't have any options, but my dad told me when I told him that, he said, you should have walked back. So, it's that type of dogmatically positioned narcissistic personality that I'm dealing with. But it was so traumatic to be blamed for something on this scale. It just, oh gosh. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so when my soul came back in, that was a defining point, because the doctor even said something greater intervened on your behalf several times, Nicole, because from a medical standpoint, you've expired. So, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's been an intense journey dealing with the mental part of this, dealing with the emotional part, feeling these emotions in my body. I was very much a intellectual who could think of an emotion, like I feel anger, but it never was in my body. And so I've had to go through a whole process and learn something called neuroemotional technique in order to integrate and align my body so that when an emotion comes up, that I can feel it instead of just trying to process it intellectually, because you have to feel it to heal it. And I think so many of us, we don't allow ourselves to actually feel in our body the emotion. And we're very emotionally illiterate in this country. We're taught pretty much bad, sad, mad, glad. Okay. But there's this whole buffet of emotions. And that's important in your healing journey to address those emotions, because otherwise, when you get triggered present day, you're going to go back to that point in time where you didn't deal with that situation that caused those emotions, and you're going to react the same way. And that's why those patterns keep going over and over. And you go, why can't I date a different guy? Why am I always dating a guy that does this to me? And it's because you haven't addressed that issue, the root issue. So you may it's kind of like you date the same color of guy, maybe a different shade. You get better, it gets a lighter shade of that same color, but you're still in the same shade instead of being able to go, I'm going to a different shade, totally. So it's been and it continues to be a journey for all of us that have to heal. And to do that, you have to look at all the components of wellness. You have to look at the physical, you have to look at the mental, the spiritual. And I think in the wellness industry, we don't give any credence to the spiritual part of healing because it's so, we don't want to upset anybody, we don't want to step on anybody's toes, but you have to deal with that part of you, that soul part of you, and start aligning with that and connecting with that and have a relationship with yourself and your soul. And you can start by just journaling, what is it my soul wants to tell me today? It can be that easy, and then sit with that. But it's so important to start that relationship because when I grew up, all I knew it was soul food in the South and soul music. I didn't understand the concept of what a soul is and what that does and that your soul goes on. I mean, reincarnation was a taboo subject, and still is for a lot of denominations, but we come back to learn these lessons if we don't get it this go round. And
Yeah, I
i'm
agree.
I am
Yeah, and
determined.
so much of your journey there seems to relate to me and mirror that. Because like I can look back as you're talking and things are coming up and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, so I can see how your father played out into the role of your accident where, that all took place. Um, but also with the triggering, and it's kind of like you're saying, like things can trigger our memories and it'll bring up things from even past lifetimes
Yes.
because I've had that, and that's where I've gone in and did my own internal work and shamanic work and energy and inner child healing. I have
Hmm.
the nutrition background degree, and I went into that, and I seen people in the eating disorder. Spirit was working with me. This is after NDE, and they were showing me this person in their lineage, their family genes were inherited from the Holocaust. So they were presenting in a different generation having eating disorder, and it came up, something triggered them and brought that up. So it's, if any repressed information is all stored in the body, and it can come up at any time, any different generations, and we don't realize it. Why are we going through this? What's happening? But as soul beings, we came in to overcome that experience.
Exactly.
That's been my understanding.
That's
And
I
so I
would
can see a lot of that. And then with my counseling, with the counseling, I've learned about a lot about that too, the mind, the body, the spirit. So I can definitely relate to a lot that you're saying, and it makes sense. So
Yeah, and I will tell you, for me, it took my body 19 years to remember. And I remember I was driving to work at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, and I
mhm.
stopped at Starbucks, regular routine to get my coffee before I go into work. And all of a sudden I had a flashback of exactly how I was sitting in that Corvette, and I could never understand how I cut my left foot off. They
Do
did
you
graft it.
recognize what triggered that memory?
No, but here's what I know now. So your body has to be there has to be a feeling of safety in your life that will allow the memories to come up. So you have to have created a sense of safety, and you have to have created a sense of resources to help you once these memories come up, that you have help processing them, grounding them, integrating them, aligning with them, and not freaking out. Because due to some severity, some of us could wind up in a mental institution trying to figure this out. So you need help with this, with trauma, with repressed memories, and they're spirit guides, as you well know. And my guides are like, okay, this accident happened at 19. 19 years later, it's time for you to remember, Nicole, because you have a mission. And they kicked my butt to remember it. And they, like in a movie, within 2 days, revealed from the beginning of the crash all the way to waking up in the ICU. And it's a detailed timeline. I couldn't make this up if I tried, of how this all happened, of going to the other side, of seeing angels over there. hearing angels, and they're not speaking English, by the way, everybody, because they this is not how it works. They communicate through telepathy and vibration.
Right.
So I don't know how I came back and was able to interpret, one of the messages is you have to ask them for help. They're not going to intervene unless they're asked. We're asking them for help because we have something called free will. We have a choice. But I'm telling you, if you ask, they will give you an answer. Now be open to what that answer looks like, but they do give you evidence that they hear you and that they support you. And all of us have at least one guardian, or you may call it a birth angel, with us. I happen to have two. And the more you work with that, it's just like any relationship, you more you grows and you understand. Um, you get their names, you get, all kinds of stuff can start coming in for you to really have more of a connected, intimate, close, confident, trusting relationship. And I can tell you, this NDE has freed me of so many fears. And I think so many of us are living in fear, and our society right now is creating so much fear and generating chaos and fear in people. And when you're in fear, that part of your brain, the amygdala, is what gets triggered.
Mm.
So that is your sympathetic nervous system going into play. So you're into that fight, flight, freeze pattern. When you're making decisions from here, you're not going to make them for your highest and greatest good because you don't have clarity. You have to make decisions from your prefrontal cortex, which is your parasympathetic. That is where you have the executive reasoning and you can make clear decisions and you can weigh the options. But when you're making them from here, you're reactionary and they're not going to be the best decision from you. So it takes practice. If you have been a fear-based person and you worry a lot, to get yourself out of this sympathetic into the parasympathetic, to get grounded, to settle your vagus nerve, to do all these little tricks and tools that all of us are out there trying to help people with, to flip yourself from one state to the other so that you
Yeah.
can get this clarity. That is so important, especially now with the fear that is being generated in this country and the world.
Yeah. And one thing that I like to do is like, where am I making this decision from? Am I in fear or am I not? And I
Yeah.
know like a lot of times like, oh, you lose a job and then you panic. And then what decisions do you make from there?
Yeah.
What is your, that's just an example. Or if you're in a tragic experience, where are you making your decisions from?
Yeah.
That fear-based or that frantic state, or are you bringing yourself into awareness, the present moment, and being like, okay, I'm going to take myself out of that space and bring myself present and then make my decision, and it's just awareness and consciousness, I think.
Yeah, and then it becomes a habit, a good habit instead of
Mhm.
reacting. But uh, it's hard to change behavior. I mean, I've worked with people trying to change their behavior with food for 3 decades, and I can tell you the increase in fruits and vegetable consumption over the last 30 years, it's remained the same. People are still eating 1.5 servings of fruits and vegetables. And let me tell you, the top one is potato in the form of French fries, and the second is tomato in the form of pizza sauce and ketchup. So, and then iceberg lettuce. So we're not making much progress here in
I think
terms
that's
of,
from the dietetic food chain, not food chain, but the pyramid. I
I
think,
used to do
people
that.
have been
Yeah.
taught that for so long, it's hard to change that perspective. Like I'm vegan and I do mostly organic as much as I can. And, I'm not dead. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just interesting. And,
Yeah.
I even have a nutrition degree. And so I understand, what they're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, and so and food is so tied up into our society and our culture, and it is such a comfort for so many people. They can't have this in life, but they can have the fast food and the French fries, and so it becomes a reward, it becomes a comfort food, it becomes a celebration. I mean, so many things are tied up in food, especially emotionally. And so it's really hard for people to make the changes they need unless they address the emotional and the mental part of why they keep getting triggered and going to that pint of Ben and Jerry's, because you're using that to press down those feelings, that you want that dopamine hit, and you get it and it works for a little while. But it's a real cycle that you get into, and you have to do the work. And this spiritually transformative work, it's hard because you have to deal with uh, family of origin issues. You have to deal with belief systems that no longer are serving you for your highest and greatest interest. You have to let go of identities that don't work for you. Okay. The identity of being a wife, a good wife, or a good mother. What does that look like? All the pressures and the expectations that go with that. It's very hard. And then as a society, what you and I are helping to do is to change the whole narrative around death, from one of doom and gloom and negative and depression to one of love and light and joy, and understanding that we're being released back to the other side, and that you never really lose that connection with the spirit of your loved one. That spirit is, their spirit is always available to us. And we just have to learn, and we can all do it, is to go within to learn your clairs. There are 8 different clairs. I'm not going to go into all that, but you can intuitively connect with that and get signs from them that they're doing okay, or they're helping you with this, that, or the other. And it's really cool when they come through and you get that, because you
Mhm.
you need that kind of evidence to validate that they're there, because we're still human. We have to, that's the thing about death is, yeah, we want to look at this greater context of the benevolence of it, and the consciousness, and we're returning to light and love. But we are also human, and we have to deal with the human emotions around death, like grief and sadness and suffering and pain and the loss of the loved one. So we have to hold both of those equally, and address both of them. It's just not one or the other, so blending that. But if you do the work, it helps. When you let go of the fear, then you're not going to hold that fear on for someone that in your family that you don't want to pass. And that's what happens a lot of times, is they're ready to go, but you're not ready for them to go. Okay. So you're keeping them back because they're picking up on your fear that they're not going to be okay without you. But my experience, along with you and hundreds of thousands of others, near death people, is that death really is absolute beauty, light, and this loving kindness on the other side. It really is this one consciousness. And we don't have anything to fear. There's no pain. Your loved ones start coming in on from the other side. People ask me all the time, will your pets greet you? I said, absolutely. Your pets go to the other side. Pets, I just want to tell people, your little fur babies and your feather friends, they come from the angelic realm. They're not angels, but they come because their lesson is helping us expand our capacity for love. There are so many people on this planet that have not experienced unconditional love from another human. The only way they can get that is from an animal,
Mhm.
And so they really are little angels in that way. They're always happy to see us. They let go of a bad day really easy, I mean, they'll do anything for a treat to please, It's just, they're just they're just so, they bring a smile to our faces, they just enhance our capacity for love and expand that. So why wouldn't they be on the other side? They do have a spirit, and yes, they will be there. All of them that you grew up with and have passed on, they are on the other side. So any person or organization or religion that's saying they don't have souls or they won't be there, please do not listen to that. In fact, if anybody is telling you God and putting fear in the same sentence with it, that is not God in my experience. Okay. God is not fear. So, this duality that's created by a lot of religions, that God is love, but God is also, you have to fear him, that's all man made.
Mhm.
God is pure love. And it's a divine intelligence. It's not a person or a persona, and I do believe in prayer. Prayer is a form of energy, and we are all energy at our, soul level. And that's how we are, this collective energy, and how what one person, everyone and everything is connected. That's one of the lessons of NDEs is we're all connected. And we have to learn that lesson. And that's what we're going through as well in this particular time space reality on this planet is we're all connected. And what
Mhm.
you're doing to your neighbor is affecting me and vice versa. And this hate and this divisiveness and this pitting each other against each other, that has got to dissolve and break up and resolve for our higher and greater good and for our soul's evolution. And that's what bottom line is. We're all here to evolve at a soul level. And this time we chose to come in to be light workers, to help lift the vibration, to get us to that place where we respect all other humans, sentient beings, and Mother Earth.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all for love. It's all in love.
Yes.
You know, even our agreements that we made before we came in, because we were on their side when we made it and they came from love. You know, we just forget when we come in here. And that's been my understanding from this whole thing. And also, like, you know, there may be people like, well, you know, you're going to hell because you don't believe in my religion, or, you know, you're going to go to hell because you don't do this. And there is no hell from my understanding. And that's my experience. And you know, it's there's no judgment by anybody but ourselves, you know, and so there's no condemnment, no none of that that a lot of the religions teach. It's our mind, it's our beliefs, our thoughts, that's hell, right? Because it's not in alignment with to love, and that's our separation. And that's how my guides share it with me and explain it to me. Whenever you're in that consciousness, you have to become aware and get yourself out of it and go back into alignment with source and love and the divineness that you truly
Yeah,
are.
and
Yeah.
I completely 100% agree with you. There is no hell. Okay, when people say, "Is there hell?" I go, "Hell no." Actually, hell is on earth. Hell is in these war zones, these countries that are torn apart, and these people living, in rubble. They can't even get water or food. Hell is somebody who's in an active addiction and can't get out of it, and the destruction they're doing to themselves and to their loved ones. To me, that is living in hell. Okay, so there's no place in the middle of the earth where there's this devil hanging out. And I talk about this in my book because I was raised to believe that we would burn in hell. And I, as a child, you grow up taking things literally. So I'm thinking, how are we going to take showers down there in hell if we're always on fire, or are we always going to eat barbecue because everything's got to be burned up, right? So it doesn't make sense, but it sure did put the fear of the wrath of God in us and fear. And we did what we were told because we didn't want to go there and be eternally separated from our family. So, that story has worked for a long time, but I think more and more people are waking up and starting to question that. And that's what I really want your viewers to understand is you have to figure this out yourself for you, what your own belief systems are, your own path to whatever you define as the one source, one force, or God, or creator, or divine energy, whatever you want to call it, that is in charge of, or that has created not only our Milky Way, but 10 trillion more Milky Ways out there, and that we do keep evolving and learning. And you have to figure that concept and out and then start investigating, start educating yourself on what you think is. Listen to programs like this. And these, we're consistent in our message, but I've never met you before, and but yet we're having the same experience and sharing the same story. And it is about love, and love is not only an emotion. Most of us think of it as romantic love when we think of love, but that's not the whole piece of it. That's a small part of it. Love is also an energy. And you can feel that coming off people like Jane Goodall, who just passed away, and the love she had for all those animals. She saved thousands of animals in her career. Mother Teresa, these people just emit love. And it is that energy, and that's that energy from the light that I talked about, God's love, that feeling of that. So that's important to really understand that love is much bigger than saying I love you, or thinking you have to please someone to earn their love, or giving a box of chocolates and a rose to someone and thinking that's
Mhm.
because I'm doing this for you, I love you. You got to get,
Right.
that's very very small thinking. You got to get into this bigger picture of what love really is and how it can work to transform the world.
Right. Yeah, and I agree. And it's I feel like right now is because we're going through this whole transformation, is like we don't need those old paradigms anymore because we're shifting consciousness and they don't have a place anymore. And so we don't need the fear and that kind of stuff, genre, because love is much higher and a higher vibration, which where we're
Right.
going. But also, with that being said, it's like just trying to, navigate that, like you were saying. We have to do it for ourselves, and follow our own inner guidance and look at all the things and just question. And I find myself doing that is like, when I hear somebody say something, okay, does that make sense? Right? Does that make sense to me? From what I know, does it fit or how does that work or what is the better way to look at it? I don't always just take what other people say, and accept it. I always question what's being said. And if it
Absolutely.
is true, then it is, that's true because all truth is truth. And if it's a variation, if it's not true, right? If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and something your inner compass, that inner knowing part of you, your intuition, it knows. That's that
Mhm.
first reaction you get in your gut. A lot of times you'll override it, but the first reaction you get is your truth of whether something aligns with you or not. So I completely support and agree with you on that. And I think, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, all this has really started to explode just probably in the last 5 years. More and more people, they estimate 10% of people have had some type of life near-death experience. But people before have either not remembered it or they have been afraid to share it because they think other people are going to judge them and shut them down, tell them they're crazy. Or like people for me, they're like, well, how do you know that that really happened if you remembered it 19 years later? That's a question I get asked a lot is, how can your memory work like that? And I just,
Stored. It's stored
yes.
just as it is. It's not distorted. It's a stored memory.
Yes. And that's just it is they have to understand that that's how the body works and that when you feel safe and when you have resources or when your guides say, "Hey, it's time," that releases and all of a sudden, wow, it's like a channel that just opens up and it just downloads on you and it's like you can't make this up. And I will tell you on the other side, my experience is there are colors that are there are more colors than we have than what's on Earth or what's in that
I love the colors.
Crayola big color, kit that we get is for kids. Yeah, there's more colors in the world. Now I can't remember them now that I'm back on this side, but I do know ever since I have come back, I wear bright colors. Okay. I mean, it's like, and I couldn't never put that together until someone recently said, "Oh, well, that's because you're always talking about colors and how important they are on the other side, and that they're more than the color spectrum here." And I said, "Yeah." I said, there's something about me. You should see my wardrobe. It is all these bright colors that I wear. The other thing is, you don't have, I often tell people the angel that took me to the other side, it's your birth or your guardian angel that's protecting you. But I said, they kind of look like Casper the ghost in that they have a form, but they're translucent. At least the image that I got was this form that lifted me off to the other side. And I knew when I flew out of the car, I knew I was going to die. I looked down on the ground, Laura, and I knew I was going to die. And I cried out, "Oh my God, help me." And that is when the angel came and took me to the other side. And when I got there, I do remember it's different levels to me, having the other side, whatever you want to call it. There's different levels that you, I think, go through there, depending on how evolved your soul is. And I do remember, he said it was more of a he that I got. We all have he and she components, the divine feminine and the masculine, but it was a more masculine trait that took me to the other side. And he had said, "Nicole, you're going to have to go back into that body." And I said, "No, I don't want to," because I could look at that body and I could see how mangled it was. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to be like physically, if I'm going to be able to walk or if I'm going to be in a wheelchair, if I'm going to be in bed all my life. I mean, I had no idea what I was going to, look like or be able to do physically or mentally. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm going back to infancy and I'm going to be totally dependent on my parents. And I couldn't even go to the bathroom myself. I couldn't feed myself. At 19 to have to go back to being an infant was so traumatic. I'm like, who wants to sign up for this? But they said, you need to go back. You have a mission, And then when I coded on the operating room, they had to do emergency surgery because I became so toxic. I got from the crash, I had a lot of open lacerations and got, debris, dirt, all of that kind of feces, all that kind of stuff, and got very toxic, developed gangrene and sepsis. So I had to go into emergency surgery. And I remember that surgery, I just left. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. It's too painful. And the angel caught me again and brought me back in and go, no, you got to get back in that body. But they actually called code blue on me. They called time of death. They told my parents in the chapel, Nicole expired. You need to start making funeral decisions. And it's just like, I wanted to keep going back to that light because I did not want to live in that pain and that suffering. And and I think that's true of a lot of people. It's just when you realize that. But a lot of people are given a choice when they're on the other side. I personally didn't feel I had a choice. I felt like I had to go back and this was going to be my mission and it was going to be hard. And the pain and the suffering that I endured at the beginning would be able to help me be persistent and carry through to continue and develop and to heal as much as I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, it was I was given a choice to come back. I didn't have to if I didn't want to. But I chose to
Yeah.
come back. But I kick myself from time to time, of course,
Yep.
because I know what it's like on the other side. And when I see things going on here, it's like, yeah, okay, I don't want to be here, you know. But yeah, and it's like, no, I chose to come back, so let's just do this. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So, and the angels, like I actually, I love that part too, because like I was never religious, I got the option to go to church or not, and I chose no, because I went a couple times and realized they didn't say, talked about things that were true as a child. So I was like, no, I don't want to go. So from there, I never really believed in angels because it was like mythological or religious, or I knew they existed from that, but I didn't really believe in them. And then when I had my near-death experience and I woke up next to one, that whole changed my whole perspective. Because when I woke up, there was one laying next to me, and it was like the wings just opened up because I felt something laying next to me, and I knew I went to sleep by myself that night. It kind of drifted off into, I don't even remember going to sleep that night, but I say sleep because I don't know how else to relate to. I was just out of the body.
Yeah.
And then when I woke up, there was like something laying next to me. And I was like, what is that? Like, because I know I was all alone beforehand. I was like, what's happening? So I was like, maybe I'm just dreaming. And I closed my eyes again and I was like, okay, let me open my eyes. And it was still there. And I was like, oh my God. And then I just felt like the whole arms, the whole wingspan from head to toe, just opening up and all this love just coming out. And I got a healing. And from there, we just got up and I was standing on one side and then they were standing and we were just looking at each other using telepathy. And then they dissipated and then the love stayed with me for like 3 days. And after that, it kind of dissipated too as well because it didn't stay. But yeah, so that was my journey with the angels, and I've just been communicating with them ever since. But they do exist, and we do have to ask for
Absolutely. And
help.
there are millions of them, millions. And I love it when you like see the number sequence of 4444. That means if you ever see that, you guys, like millions of angels are with you right then and there, okay, for whatever's going on. That's the interpretation of those numbers from the angelic realm. So I love
Mm-hmm.
seeing that. It always reminds me I'm not alone. And that is one of the messages from the other side is we are not alone. We think maybe that we are alone because there's not a physical person there, but there's millions of uh, of entities on the other side, whether they're spirit guides, angels, deceased loved ones, ascended masters, whatever on the other side, that are waiting to help us if we ask. And they're always working for our greater good. And that's what we have to understand, that they are working for our highest and greatest good. And sometimes you hear that phrase, man, thank God some of my prayers weren't ever answered when you look back on your life. So, I've learned to pray a little bit differently now and say, what is for the highest and greatest good? Because I don't always know what that looks like for somebody. You may think, oh, they need to live longer, but maybe they're going, no, I'm in so much pain. You don't understand. I don't want to keep being on a dialysis machine 3 times a week for the rest of my life. You don't understand what that's like, even though I'm still alive. Everyone has a different experience with that and what they want their quality of life to be. But I really do think that we have got to start talking to children at a younger age. It has to be age appropriate, but about what death is and the experience of death, and making it part of growing up and being educated about it, because so many things are happening in our world now where children are getting murdered in schools and stuff like that. And so it's important. I mean, the Sandy, not this, well, the Sandy Hook was definitely started it all, but even just what happened over the summer with Mystic Lake and all those campers and people that children that vanished. It's trying to understand, okay, how do you talk to children about death in a positive way? And I know for my sister, whose husband died of ALS when her children were 10 and 13, I do remember they're both boys, and one of the boys said, Mom, are you going to die too? That's a natural response for a child if they lose a parent. They're scared that the other one's going to go too. And of course, she said, No, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. And I said, maybe you ought to rephrase that, because you really don't know that you don't have any guarantees you're going to be fine. I mean, yeah, you're taking care of your health and yourself, but something could happen to you. So maybe a different type of conversation would be, well, I plan to be around. I'm taking care of myself. There's nothing that would indicate something would happen to me. But if something should, here's what's going to happen. And tell them, you're going to move in with your aunt and your uncle, and you're going to go to a different school, but you're going to be taken care of from a financial perspective. And I'll be watching you from the other side. Or, give them some hope, and to lessen their anxiety about it, because they're filled with this, they have to make it up themselves or what's going to happen, and they're living unconsciously with that fear that something's going to happen to you and then what's going to happen to them. But it's managing expectations. And I was just at the doctor yesterday, and they were so good in the office. The doctor's running, way behind. She's got 2 other patients ahead of you, including a new patient that's going to be 30 minutes. So you're going to have about a 45-minute wait. We're really sorry, but she will get to you. I'm like, you're the first doctor's office that has actually managed that expectation. The pilots do it a lot on the airplanes, we're being delayed due to whatever, because you're sitting there wondering what's going on, and we don't deal well as humans with uh, living in uncertainty. It really causes our anxiety to go up. So, as much as you can, manage expectations around subjects that you can.
Yeah, we need to have those conversations early and correct. So, like, our minds will wander. If we don't have the knowing, our
Yeah.
minds will wander, and it creates these anxiety and stuff. So, because we don't know, right? And then it puts us in fear.
Exactly. And we already have an epidemic of anxious and depressed generations that are coming up, that
Mhm.
are we've got to learn to help them through that.
Yeah. Now, did you have intuitive abilities before the near-death experience, or and heightened when you come back? 'Cause I know a lot of them, it works that way for them. And then same with me. Did that happen for you?
No, my parents were really good about drilling out any intuitive anything out of any of us. It was very much, you go to Sunday school, you learn there, and if you do anything or come up with anything that conflicts what your Sunday school teacher says or the church says, that is, you just couldn't even entertain that thought and express it. Just like you could never tell your true emotion to your parents. You can't say anything that would hurt your mother, because that was the message. Don't you hurt your mother, don't you do anything to hurt them. And it was a very clear message. Don't get angry at them. Don't do anything that would cause them to feel hurt. That was like the worst thing you could do. So no, it was all shut down very early on all of us kids. My mother is from the Ukraine. She did have it early on, as well as her sister, but she got highly involved in religion, and she won't even talk about that now. But she did it, she did have that perception at a younger age, and did earlier when we were kids mention it. But then once she got into the religion heavily, she completely acts like she doesn't even remember that. And no, I would have never done that. I would have never said that. And that's not possible, kind of stuff. So very disheartening, but I can see how religion keeps you in a focused kind of tunnel, and it gives you an excuse so you don't have to take responsibility for something. You can just say, well, it was God's will, instead of you having to own it.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah.
Okay. Did you experience the void or a life review?
No, I think because I wasn't on the other side that long. And my whole life, I was literally a good girl. I did everything I was told to do. And I got this um, channel recently that your life review didn't need to be done at that particular point in time, because you weren't even making your own choices. They were all being chosen for you. And now that you're 19 years old, that's when your choices really start. And you have, 18, 19, that's when these choices are starting. But I do know that you do have it. There was some part of the experience that I do know that everything that we say, think, and do on this planet, we are going to have to be responsible to that, whether it is in a positive or negative way. So I tell people all the time, lead with love and kindness. It's going to cut your life review down dramatically. Okay. And just know that, because it's not a judgment, but you will have to feel it, and you will have to understand what you did that caused that hurt and caused that pain and suffering to other people. So yeah, it's an important piece to remind yourself in a present day, just like death can happen at any moment. Now, that's not a fun thing to think about every day, but it needs to be at top of mind at some level, that when you're interacting with someone, you may never see them again. You don't know what could happen. I mean, that's just the way life is, somebody can just fall down with a heart attack and die right there. I mean, it's just that's just the way life is right now. It has been. And so leave these conversations in a high vibration of love and kindness and light, and really think about your words, because words do matter. They do have an impact. So be mindful in choosing your words, and just remember, when you leave somebody or say goodbye, that may be the last time that you see them. It's not that you have to get morbid about it or whatever, but it's always a reminder to go higher with your vibration when you say goodbye to someone.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely can speak to that, and I think it helps to make us live more consciously and
Yes.
appreciate life more, being from that space. Now, with your near-death experience, when you went to the other side, what was your experience over there? Did you, because you did say sources like is it's an intelligence, which is my understanding and what came to me. And when I asked, for how to connect or relate to source, I got this feeling of intelligence. I didn't get a picture, an image of a man,
No.
with a beard. I got intelligence, and I
Yes.
felt intelligence. And on the other side, I had my own experience. So what was yours? Did you see anything, or what did any people? I seen what I call light beings with no faces, but they were in the shape and form, translucent. And so what was your experience on the other side?
I definitely saw other angelic beings in that same form that mine was in. And I heard the conversation, and they were specific to let me hear. They allowed me to hear the conversation because they wanted me to take it back, which was to tell people that they need to ask for help. Their conversation was saying, please let people on earth know that we are here to help them, but they have to say, we need your help. They have to ask for that help, unless it's a life or death situation, and they will intervene if it is for your life path plan. And it's not your time to go yet. They will intervene on your behalf if it's life and death in that situation. But otherwise, that was an important message. And so people laugh at me when I ask the angels for a parking space because they're like, well, that's such a small thing to ask. Why would you bother an angel with something like that? I'm like, you don't understand. It's not that they can absorb only so many requests at one time. They have a finite ability to process so many requests. They're limitless. They can multitask a bazillion things. It's like with our eyes, we can only see maybe 40 degrees out, but the eyes of the angel, now they're translucent, but they can see 360 ahead and behind all at the same time, so it's like you have to really, I mean, it's just really wild how that can happen, but it's all instantaneously. And time as we know it here does not exist on that plane, so things can happen like this, and here it's 100 years or something as that developed. So definitely saw the angels, definitely had this angel that interacted with me. My I now know my deceased grandfather on my paternal side was watching me at the Air Force Academy the whole time, saw the abuse that I was enduring, heavy abuse from a physical, mental, and sexual, unfortunately, perspective, knew I was unhappy, knew I was in fear, knew I couldn't get out. And he later came to me and told me this car crash was the only way for you to get out, quote, saving face, meaning it was a legitimate excuse to get out of the Air Force Academy because now I'm considered 100% disabled veteran based on the extent of my injuries. So there was no way I could go back. So that put the period to my father that, she's going to go back. She's going to keep going through, it was like, no, she's done with the academy. That part of her life is over. So, sometimes these things that are so tragic and you can't understand them, they turn out to be a gift, and I can see that now because I would have stayed in that bubble that I had been in and been like my siblings who continue uh, uh, to believe what they were brought up with. In fact, my sister's gone very religious, like evangelical, like my parents. My brothers are they don't talk about it. They get busy with work. They're like deal with work and do, they don't really think about it. And so I would have been in the same boat, just still aligning with my parents' belief systems because we needed to be a family. And I was raised that family is the most important thing. And you have to, if your family is the most important thing, you have to keep your part that you've always played intact for everything to run smoothly. So when you start changing your belief systems and acting like, I don't believe this, I don't want to be a part of this, or I'm not going to tolerate, setting boundaries, I'm not going to tolerate racism, and you calling people this, that, or the other, when you start putting these boundaries up, they don't like it because it challenges them, but they don't want to have to look at it. And they just want to be able to get away with what they, all no conflict, everything's nice and hunky dory, we're all getting along here. But the truth is, we're not, and so having to blow that up by coming out and being who you are, you have to be willing to let go of the possibility of a relationship with the family of origin as you know it. And then you come to understand that you're part of a bigger soul family, and you realize that's really more important in the bigger scheme than your family of origin. We're all here to learn from each other, to play these different parts, to help us learn these lessons, and remembering who these people really are from the spirit realm. Like you said, we get spiritual amnesia when we come into this world. We forget that we are these souls who are beautiful and perfect and radiant and eternal. And that's who you see when you go to the other side, is that person, that your loved one in that spiritual soul perfect form. That's who you're interacting, not who they were on earth as an alcoholic or a mean person or whatever. That all has gone away. They're that pure radiant love, and that's what you're connecting with. So I try to remember that about some people in my life who I don't have anything to do with now. It's when I still get triggered, I try to go, okay, they're really light and love at their core, even though they're being judgmental and hypocritical and all these things right now. It's like that's not who they really are. But you also have to set your boundaries, and you have to say, I'm not willing to have a relationship with you anymore. And that's really hard when
Mm,
you've grown up and told that, family's the most important. You got to make yourself get along. And then, you need to forgive, and all of these messages that mix you up and confuse you about what you need to do. But that's about really becoming your own person and individuating and understanding why you're really here, and to move forward at your on your soul's purpose. That's what you're really following now, which is what you're doing, which is what I'm doing. We've evolved to that and really know and are 100% certain this is our path.
yeah. The black sheep of the family,
Yes.
is
Yep,
what they give
exactly.
us, is that term. And although they think, oh, you're the bad seed, we're actually not.
Yes.
We're actually the ones that break all the karmic loops and all the ancestral lines, and we change dynamics.
Yep.
And it's not easy to be the one to step out and be
No.
that black sheep of the family. But
No, it's not. It's not. And that's why I'm so glad there are programs like this where we can have realize
mhm,
that we're not alone with that, because it can be a very lonely experience.
yeah. Now, have you tried telling your family about the near death experience, or
Oh, definitely. I was very
okay.
excited. And then, when my book came out, there it was for them to read. And they honestly don't believe it, because it conflicts with their religious doctrine,
Mhm.
and that they really believe we'll be judged. And so when I talk about not being judged, they're like, no, you're being hypocritical, you're being a heathen and all this stuff. And that when I talk about that God, we are all an eternal spark of God. You don't need an external conduit to get to God. God is within all of us. you know um, they don't, that's not in their belief system. So unfortunately, they don't they don't agree with it. So it really is sad for me that they don't, because it was such a life altering experience for me. But at the end of the day, I can't change anybody's belief system. It's not my job to do that. All I can do is share my experience, strength, and hope and insight, and hope it's effective, and maybe planting a seed that, oh, maybe I need to question what the church is telling me about this. That really doesn't make sense, that women should be subservient or submissive to men. We're all equal in the eyes of God, or this divine intelligence. Everything's created equally. So why would they give us that message?
Mhm. Yeah. Did you sounds like the one that you were in the car crash with, they didn't pass over. Is that right?
No, he had very limited injuries. I think it's because they say when you have a lot of alcohol in you, you're looser, and you don't you don't get as you don't have as many injuries. But he didn't. He was only in the hospital a couple of weeks with some back issues. Went on back to the academy and did graduate.
Mhm.
So any other cadet would have been kicked out on honor code violations and various other. I mean, you can't have the state charges against you for vehicular assault and be a cadet in any of these academies, but
Mm,
he
yeah.
did, because his dad was a general at the time. So it was very upsetting to me that he was allowed to get away with something because of who his father was.
Yeah, and understand that. Was there any healing work that you had to do around that for yourself and your
Oh,
path?
I went to therapy for years, cognitive behavioral therapy. Wrote him a letter, actually sent the letter, uh, got a reply back that, you know, he did, it just wasn't what I wanted. And he's blaming me for, you know, uh, trying to ruin him. And it was just not,
Mm,
he's an addict. And unfortunately, I have no communication with him and haven't for decades, and don't need to. I really know that that was part of his life planned path as well. And he'll have to answer for that on the other side, you know. So it's not my judge. I had to heal myself and to forgive myself and to forgive him. Um, and that was the piece that was the hardest for me. But that took a lot of therapy, and I did all the work to do that. And it really, you know, what I wanted in all of these relationships is just peace, Laura. I wanted this peace, and that is part of a religious saying that I remembered, the peace that passes all understanding. You know, that phrase I had remembered. And that's what I want, is I don't want to have to get triggered anymore, whether it's family members or what. I just want a sense of peace and contentment and go, let them be who they are, you know, and me to have resolved it within me to where I am at peace with it.
Yeah. And that's great that you went through the healing with that. I know I did on a lot of my relationships too. And it wasn't easy. And but that's
Yeah.
an important message though, because even when we have situations like that, it's not about judging them. And it's not about giving them forgiveness. And it's about our own inner work because they do their own,
Yeah.
and that's an important piece to know. And it's not always about not healing myself because they're to blame, right? And that's how I look at it and what I've been shown, because we all have our agreements, whether we
Hmm.
want to believe it or not. They agree to be there to help us go through it. And, we have both takeaways. They have their experience and we have ours, and we're only in control of ours. And that's just how I like to look at it, from my own experience. But it's a really
That's
important
very
message.
Yeah, and it's very freeing when you can look at it that way, because you're
Mm-hmm.
not holding on to resentment or gall or anger or frustration. You know, all of these, what in Chinese medicine we call the wood energies,
Mm-hmm.
energy medicine, and that are just really difficult emotions to continue to live with, because they really, if you don't heal these emotional wounds, they will show up as dis-ease, physical dis-ease in your body. And you've just, that's part of the work that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there's no shortcuts around it, and everybody's on a different timetable. Healing is not linear. I thought if I did A plus B, it would equal C. If I ate right, did the physical activity, got the rest, this wouldn't happen to me, but my husband's a perfect example. 2 months ago, the doctor all of a sudden said, you're going to have open heart surgery. My husband's never been on a medication. He's never had high cholesterol, nothing. All of a sudden, they realized he had a jaw pain and went to the doctor, and they're like, all of a sudden, these cardiac tests. And next thing I know, he just had open heart surgery. You would have never known it. And the doctor just said he could have just dropped dead any day. He's done everything right, but it's not linear. That's what I guess I'm trying to tell people. It doesn't assure you that you're going to have this good outcome. And in our society, we have falsely convinced people if they do A plus B, it will equal C in the wellness and healing journey. And that's not true. Sometimes it goes A to Z to F to or, and it just back. So it can take all kinds of detours and look different from everyone. So it doesn't guarantee you a healing, and you have to release that expectation, or you're going to be very frustrated in your life.
Yeah, exactly. You never know, unless you
No.
remember your agreements,
Yeah.
because I think everybody has a destined time. We just don't remember, from this perspective. But so with connecting death, near-death experience and death, what would you say from a near-death experiencer's viewpoint about, transitioning and dying, if they're in fear or, going through that process?
Well, I think first of all, you have to unpack what your fear is with death, and, is it that you are afraid of the pain? You're afraid of being alone. You're afraid of your family not being able to get along without you. You're the one that's holding them together, and it's all going to dissolve if you leave. What exactly is the fear point for you? You're scared that, you're never going to see them again, or just really. So it's dialing that down and understanding what the specific fear is. And you're afraid of the afterlife or whatever. And then to really understand, is that fear rational or irrational? Most of our fears are irrational. And to really talk it through with someone, that is experienced, that understands death, whether it's a death doula or a hospice worker or somebody, that can talk to you about what they experience around death. And it is peaceful, and you don't have to worry about this. And then I think the other piece is it frees you when you can let go of that fear, because when you're living in fear, you're not going to truly live your life.
Exactly, that's beautiful. And also looking at near-death experiencers' stories, because it's a
Absolutely. Yeah.
prelude to what you're going to go through. And if you are prepared, then you know what to expect and how to move through it more easily and gracefully without the fear. I feel like it's very helpful. And one of the reasons why a lot of people are coming out with their near-death experiences to help with the dying process,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and we're all going to die. I mean, that is our reality, whether you want to believe it or not. You at some point are going to leave this earth in this body. And, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, it's going to happen to you. So we do need to do a better job preparing ourselves and others for this, because if you're not prepared, it actually fractures families once the person dies and they're dealing with wills and they're dealing with mom said I was going to get the china, and no, you took the china. I mean, it just fights and relationships that just sometimes never heal from the argument and the miscommunications, and what you thought was going to happen, and the reality of what's happening. And so it's so important to have these conversations about what you want for your death, and have it in writing, and make sure the other person knows what kind of music do you want played, even those kind of details, because it's important everybody's on the same page. And when you're not on the same page, that's when this fracturing of families happens, and it never heals for a lot of
Mhm.
families.
Yeah, and then all the arguing takes away from the beautiful moment of the transition because it
Right.
is powerful. It's part of life,
Yeah,
and we miss it because we're all in the chaos, right? And we're
that's
missing the
exactly.
beautiful transition and send off.
Yeah,
And then it's like we grieve it, and then it's like it's gone now. The moment's passed.
that's right.
We can't get that moment back to have the experience with them. Now I made a post on Facebook, and then we're going to kind of bring this into a close. About having certain rituals when we're passing. We're making the funeral arrangements. We're going to put our loved ones in a graveyard, and nobody really goes there except for special occasions. And so we're harnessing this energy and space on land, um,
Mhm.
and a lot of it's toxic, right? We're embalming the body, we're putting that all in into the land. Takes so forever to break down when naturally our body knows how to die. It does it on its own, it's intelligence, and we don't really need to do all that. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you had responded to that comment.
Absolutely. You bring up such an important and valid point, and especially the green space that's being taken up with cemeteries. This goes all the way back to the Egyptians, mummifying bodies, putting them in these tombs, putting them in there with jewels and all that kind of stuff, and trying to preserve the body. And I think we as humans need to evolve beyond this preserving of the body, and to understand that the body is meant to decay, and that it doesn't make sense, and it is becoming more cost prohibitive for people to bury people in the old traditional sense of the coffin and all of that. And what they don't understand, I think, is this is not about the person that's already passed. This is about them and what they're thinking they need to be okay with that person having passed, that they do have a place to go if they ever choose to, where that's where they can talk to them or whatever, instead of realizing you can talk to them at any point. You don't have to go to a place. It's like church. I tell people nature is my church. I just go out in nature, and that's how I commune. I really feel the presence of this divine intelligence is in nature. Well, the same thing about once somebody's passed. So all of this is basically show and tell, in my opinion, and to give the people that are still living some type of comfort. But I think the younger generations are definitely more of the mindset of being more eco-friendly, and cremation is increasing in terms of people choosing of that way of disposing of the body. And now there's different methods with water, and they're coming out with different methods of decomposition that is definitely not taking up as much earth space, or like you're saying, the embalming process. And there are classes you can take. I took one in death and dying from a university at a college course, and it was eye-opening to actually go to a mortuary and to see what they do when they embalm a body. I mean, that, you want to talk about an image you can't get out of your head. It is horrific. And if you understand, wow, that's what they're doing to my loved one. And then you see, the oven that you'll be cremated in, and it brings it really home to what is it that you really want, because you're gone. I mean, that's the thing about this death experience. I don't remember being in my body anymore. I don't have the brain and the memories and all of that. It's completely, there's no pain association with it. You're not going to remember getting burned in the oven or being embalmed or anything. It's just, you're completely gone from all of that. So it really is about those that are still around, and them holding on to an old belief system that somehow they're more comforted if, and they'll say, well, mom wanted to go this way. This is how mom wanted to do it. And that still isn't old. I think that's changing. Maybe the 80-year-olds and the 90-year-olds still feel that way, because that's was the way it was before them and before them and before them. But we're awakening to a new consciousness with how to dispose of people in their bodies in a more eco-friendly, conscious, more authentic, natural way. And I totally support that. And I've already instructed my husband, we're both being cremated. We already know that ahead of time. And it's just important to have those discussions, and to make sure it's in writing and that the family will honor it. Because I recently went to a relative's funeral, and the family wanted her embalmed. She wanted to be cremated, and she made that known, but they totally disregarded her wishes, and they wound up embalming her. And it was just very, very sad. Um, and to see someone in that embalmed state, people take pictures now and they're even posting them in the coffins. Used to, you wouldn't even do that, but you can just see they're empty. They just, like, it doesn't look like my aunt. That doesn't, it really doesn't look like. Well, it's because her soul's missing. It's just this body that has just withered away for a lot of people. Or so you're bringing up such an important point that we really need to have more discussions about, and also looking at the cost figure, because I think the last time I looked, if you did a funeral with a coffin and all that, it was almost $20,000.
Yeah, exactly. It's expensive. And from, just what we've been talking here, our spirit goes to the other side. It's not in the coffin. That's the body that we take up the form, and that's what we're disposing of. And just finding the more practical, healthy, organic way to do that, I feel like is important. And I also think doing that helps us to bring in the realization that this is just the body, and it's no attachment, no suffering, less suffering, if we understand and do that by actually doing it physically and mentally, emotionally, knowing that we're moving on and we're not that, and we're just putting that to rest, right? That
Yes,
part of the journey, and not our loved one, because
yes,
we're
yes.
holding all the energy. And I feel like we're putting the energy into that space when we're burying them in that way, with the attachment that they are in the body, right? And not fully getting it. And I think it will be, so much more healing and easier for people to grieve and get past if we can do it more organically, naturally.
Yeah, I think we need to rewrite the script for Halloween, and we got to get rid of these coffins at Halloween too. So I'm not sure how we do that, but that's not helping people either. They think they have to go into the coffin. So,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
scares kids, when
Mhm.
Halloween, seeing the skeletons in the coffins, that is very traumatic for a lot of children. I don't think
Yeah,
people realize that. They try to make light and fun of it, but it is scary for a lot of these wee ones.
yeah. And I think it's part of the ingrainment that, the death, the coffin, is part of the childhood ingrainment to put that
Yes.
fear. into it, I think. And a lot of times we do that not directly, but indirectly by the things that we're doing, to integrate that and help, give them the message. But it's the wrong
Yeah.
message, I think. And, helping, just having the conversations will help clear that up. But at the same time, it's just being mindful about the topic. Is there anything else that we didn't go over? Any last words? Anything that you want to share that we didn't get to talk on?
Oh, I think we could talk for days probably, Laura, about this subject of
I know.
nutrition and things like that. We could do a whole show on nutrition with your background and my background. But yeah, no, I think I've said everything. I just want people to not judge themselves. I think if you can take one thing away today is give some grace to yourself. You're doing the best you can in this moment right here and right now. And we are operating on an unconscious level with most of the decisions and things. So you're starting to become aware. And by watching this show today, you opened up your awareness to a different way of maybe seeing something or believing something or challenging a belief system that you have. But take out the word should in your vocabulary. Don't say, I should have done this or I should have said that. Eliminate should, okay? Because that is a very shame-based word. And every time you say that to yourself, to someone else, you are implying shame, okay? And that is not helping you heal and it's not helping them heal. So instead, raise the vibration, say, I could have done better with this. Let me try that next time and become aware and learn from it and do differently next time. But truly quit judging ourselves, because I know, especially if you're dealing with any type of eating disorder or anything like that, shaming yourself is part of the root of that, and you got to let it go because you are here, you're beautiful, you have a purpose, and you're ultimately eternal. So you're not doing anything wrong, you know?
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, and definitely we could probably do a lot of other podcasts. So if you ever want to do another one, just let me know.
Okay.
We do have a lot to talk about. And then where can people find you and your book?
Yeah, so I'm NicoleKerr.com is my website. And here's my book, You Are Deathless. And I just wanted to see, you see my credentials up here? Do you see
Yeah.
BTDT? Do you
Yep.
know what that means?
I think you've said it before, been there, done that.
Yeah, and people always are like, how can you get that as a credential? And I said, for an experience like I went through and other people with near-death experiences, there's no school or university where you get a degree or an education in this. It is totally experiential. But we do all know that we've been there and we've done it and we've had this experience. So if you have anything like that in your life where there's no, educational process to do it, steal that credential, put it on your resume, because that makes you an expert in it, having done it and been there, and you can share it. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and you can reach out to me. I also did my own voice recording for the audible version of this. There are pictures in it. You can go to my website and you can look at all the book images of the pictures, the car crash, all that kind of stuff is in there as well. And yeah, and if you are looking for someone to join you, if you have a book club and you want to use my book, I'm happy to zoom in on your book club meeting and to be a part of that for a little while and answer any questions anybody has.
Perfect. Thank you. I might have to take you up on that. I'll have to get back to you on that. I have an
Okay.
idea. So we'll see. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your journey and your story and your wisdom.
Welcome.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about you and me. We're not the one and only. It's going to happen to everybody. Yeah, baby. Say it isn't so, baby. It's the truth, don't you know, baby?